Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you for the response. We are from the first group in this subject. We'll presentation about linguistic principles. Before beginning the presentation, let me introduce the speakers. In this group, there are 6 speakers. There is Agnesia Shelika, Eli Fauzia, Mujayanti, Indah Laras, Riki Novita, and last is Penny Violeta. Please for the next slide. Okay, for this slide we will present about from Penny.
Okay, thank you, Laras. Before I explain about basic grammatical concept, I will explain the introduction of principle psycholinguistic. Okay, and the first is focus of linguistic books is on how people process language, how comprehend and produce spoken and written language, and how these skills are acquired. This capture deal with the structure of language and the study of language proof otherwise. As we learn how language are organized, we realize how truly complex they are, and to understand these language processes, we need to understand two major properties of language as well as processing characteristic of the individuals who use it. And this capture is organized into 4 sections. The first section is basic grammatical concept, common to a number of linguistic theories. The second is examine American Sign Language and consider whether the concept introduced in the first section apply to a language in the visual modality. The third section discuss historical significant theory of grammar, transformational grammar. And finally, we consider some unsolved controversies in the study of grammar. Okay, and then I will explain about basic grammatical concept. Basic grammatical concept language differ in a host of ways. Some language, like English, are rather strict about word order. For example, the boy casts the girl casts the boy. Other languages use word order in different ways. In Japanese, the basic word order is subject, object, verb, or SOV. A simple Japanese sentence is translated literally Totaro to Hanako, that book gave, where Han means book and Yata means give. And the next is Russian are more flexible about word order. In Russian, mean is convey less by word order than by the affixes or suffixes and prefixes that are attacked the words and slightly modify their meaning. In English, we know that we can express a word in a variety of interactive form such as trip, repeat, typing, and so forth. But other languages have far greater number of such forms. The system of affixing is considerably more complex in Russian and most languages than in English. And the next is duality of patterning. Duality of Patterning is a grammatical concept that is basic to the study of language. At one level, there is a large number of meaningful elements or words. At another level, there is relatively small numbers of meaningless elements that are combined to form the words in spoken languages. These meaningless elements are individual speech sound. This form of duality does not appear to exist in animal communication. Duality of patterning appears to be a universal property of language. Languages differ in their phenomena and in rules by which the phenomena may be combined to form words. However, all languages have duality, a level at which there is a relatively small number of basic meaningless elements and another level at which there is a large number of meaningful elements. Okay, and the next slide will be present by Mujayanti.
Okay, morphology. We have seen that the phonemes are combined to form words. Another important way in which we use words is to use different forms of the same word to convey different sets of meaning. The system of rules that governs this aspect of language is referred to as morphology. The smallest meaningful unit in a language is referred to as a morpheme. Some words, such as truck, consist of only a single morpheme. Others consist of two or more morphemes. Bedroom consists of the morphemes bed and room. We may also distinguish between free morphemes, which may stand alone, and code morphemes, also called grammatical morphemes, which, although contributing to word meaning, are not words themselves. And the next slide is phrase structure. A third central concept in grammatical description is phrase structure. Intuitively, we know that sentences can be divided into groups of words or constituents. Consider the sample declarative sentence 14. The young swimmer accepted the silver medal. This can be indicated by parentheses as in sentence 15. The young swimmer accepted the silver medal. We can further subdivide the last group as follows. Number 16. The young swimmer accepted the silver medal. The items in parentheses are the constituents of the simple declarative sentence. And then this is a simple set of phrase structure rules. And then the table 2.3, there are steps in the derivation of the young swimmer accepted the silver medal. And then the next slide is four basic grammatical concepts are duality of patterning, morphology, phrase structure, and linguistic productivity. Words are composite of phonemes, which in turn have distinctive features. In each instance, the smaller units are combined in a rule-governed manner to produce the larger unit. Words consist of one or more units of meaning or morphemes. The system of grammatical morphemes in a language provides speakers with a way of signaling subtle difference in meaning. Phrase structure rules codify our intuitions about the groupings of words in a sentence. Some sentences are ambiguous and may be grouped in more than one way. Linguistic productivity refers to the fact that there is no limit to the number of sentences in a language. One type of phrase structure rule, that of recursion, is responsible for some of this productivity. And then the
Okay.
Laras.
Okay. In this slide, I will be presentation. I will tell you about insight from sign language. For the definitions, is sign language is a visual way of communicating where someone uses hand, gestures, and movements, body language, and facial expressions to communicate. And next slide, please. For the differences between sign and spoken language, is spoken language use vocal auditory channel, while sign language does not use any such medium. However, both have been claimed to differ more profoundly in the level to which spoken language is made of arbitrary signs, while the other one is built on more iconic signs. Okay, next please. Next slide, please. Okay. Similarities between sign and spoken language. You can see on slide, sign language are natural languages as they arise naturally from a need to communicate with deaf infants. Their acquisition process is very similar to that of spoken languages, and deaf babies go through the same stages of acquisition as hearing babies. In this slide, about significance of sign language. Sign language help build communication in addition to bridging missing gaps. When you learn sign language and practice it can actually help you with all aspects of communication. Even children who aren't hearing impaired can benefit from it if they use it during their early development years. Okay, for the summary, sign languages are an extremely important communication tool for many deaf and hard of hearing people. Sign languages are the native languages of the deaf community and provide full access to communication. For the next slide will be present by the next speaker, please.
Okay, my name is Mujayanti and I want to present about transformational grammar. In linguistics, transformational grammar or transformational generative grammar is part of generative grammar theory, especially natural language. It considers language as a system that actually produces combination of words that make up grammatical sentence in a given language and use the use of defined operation called transformation to generate new sentence from existing one. This method is generally done by American linguist Noam Chomsky. Next slide, please. For example, the cake is eaten. When the icon of the subject is not identified, we use identified pronouns to fill in the slots where it will appear in the inner structure, as an someone eats the cake. This deep structure, however, would result in a surface structure of the cake was eaten by someone. To explain sentence, the transformation grammar proposes a rule of deletion that omits prepositional phrase containing the subject again. We can say, therefore, that the sentence has undergone to transformation the elimination of passive and passive against. Next slide, please. Transformational rules. In transformational grammar, all sentence derivation is a two-part process. First, the phrase structure rule is used to produce the underlying tree structure, which we refer to as the inner structure. Second, a sequence of transformational rules, sometimes called transformation, is applied to the inner structure and the intermediate structure, which lies between the inner the surface structure, which in turn result in a sentence surface structure and phrase-like structure, unlike the phrase structure rule, which only applies to one constituent at a time. The transformation applies to all constituent string. They change it by adding, removing, or moving constitution. Next slide, please. And the last is summary. Transformational grammar assumes that sentences have both structural depth and surface structure. The inner structure is derived by a series of phrase structure rules, and the surface structure is derived from the inner structure by a series of transformational rules. Transformational grammar can explain certain aspects of good language, such as the ambiguity of deep structure, for which the rules of phrase structure cannot fully account for. And the next slide will be presented by next speaker.
Okay, thank you, Muja. I will present about transformational rules. Within transformational grammar, the entire derivation of a sentence is a two-part process. First, phrase structure rules are used to generate the underlying tree structure we have referred to as the deep structure. Second, a sequence of transformational rules, sometimes simply called transformation, is applied to the deep structure and the intermediate structures, thus that between the deep and surface structures, ultimately generating the surface structure of the sentence. Right? Okay, John points up the woman. John points the woman up. We know that the following two sentences mean the same thing. An alternative approach is to assume that the two sentences have the same deep structure and to apply the particle movement transformation. The transformational rule would look like this. B plus part plus NP, B plus NP plus part. Consider now the following sentences. John found up the interesting woman. John found the interesting woman up. John found up the woman with the curly hair. John found the woman with the curly hair. Now, notice that in each case, the particle is shifted around the entire NP. 3 in 28 and 6 in 30. The point is that the particle movement is defined in terms of constituents, not words. condition gives transformational grammar tremendous power to apply to an infinite number of entities. Instead of setting the rule in terms of the number of words, which will vary from sentence to sentence, we set it in terms of grammatical structures such as NPs. Because the movement is dependent on the grammatical structure, rules such as these are said to be structure dependent. A second example is the passive transformation. Simplified somewhat, the rule is as follows: NP1 plus V plus NP2, and then NP2 plus B plus V plus and plus by plus NP1. This complex transformation, which might be involved in the derivation of sentence, contains several elementary operations. Let us begin with the active sentence and add the transformation needed to produce the passive sentence. Okay, next slide, please. Good. In transformational rules, we add auxiliary. We use do or does. Example: the boy does read the book. But does not read the book. Does the boy read the book? The does is auxiliary. For the summary, transformational grammar assumes that sentences have a deep structure and a surface structure. The deep structure is derived by a series of phrase structure rules, and the surface structure is derived from the deep structure by a series of formational rules. Transformational grammar can explain certain aspects of language, such as deep structure ambiguity that cannot be accounted for entirely by passive structure rules. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Okay, thank you. The next part is the centrality of syntax. In lexical theories, for example, Bresnan 1978, greater emphasis is placed on individual lexical items or words than is given in more structured theories, such as a transformational grammar. This view has been influential in recent years in diverse areas of psycholinguistics, including language comprehension, language production, and language development. In lexical functional grammatical, lexical entries also include the various forms of the words, for example, kiss, kisses, and kissing, and the different kinds of sentence into which each form would fit. The lexicon entry for kiss would indicate its underlying semantic structure as kiss, again, and patient. That is, the verb requires both an again and a patient. John kiss is not a grammatical sentence. And the meaning relation between these two sentences is preserved strong lexical rules that specify the relation between different forms of a word, not by transformational rules. By storing syntactic information in the lexicon entry in the meta dictionary, lexical theories simplify the process of comprehending sentence. Jackendoff suggests the grammars have multiple sets of formation rules, syntax, semantic, phonology,
and thus a complete account of grammar requires attention to the interfaces between these different systems. On implication of Chekendall's view of language is that it may be easier to understand the evolution of language. The evolution of language poses a problem for language theorists because it is not obvious how language could evolve through the process of natural selection. Hauser, Chomsky, and Fitch. In a provocative article such as that we should distinguish between what they term the faculty of language in the broad sense and the faculty of language in the narrow sense. Is language innate? Nativists assert that children are born with some linguistic knowledge, and empiricistic instead claim that children acquired language from linguistic experience. In certain situations in which children are not presented with any consistent linguistic model, they appear to have the capacity to invent some aspect of a language. This parameter has two values: null subject, the language allows sentence without a subject. A subject, the language requires subject for sentence to be grammatical. This Italian is a null subject language and English is a subject language. The analogy is not perfect. We have acquired the categories in restaurant A from experience, whereas the language parameters are presumed to be innate. Parameter settings theories would suggest that without built-in categories and value, a children would be lost in a sea of linguistic details and would not be able to acquire a language as well as most children do. Okay, thank you. We'll be back to moderator.
Okay, thank you so much for your attention and thank you for listening our presentation. Mohon maaf apabila ada kesalahan kata dan mungkin ada kendala dalam jaringan yang mengakibatkan presentasi ini mungkin terdengar kurang cukup jelas. Saya akhiri. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.